Hello, everyone, and welcome to this video from iSight. I am here today with Catherine Mattice, the founder of Civility Partners. We are going to be doing a webinar on January 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are here to discuss quite a few different things, including psychological safety in the workplace. Catherine, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to kick this off with the very first question. Tell me a bit about the definition of psychological safety in the workplace and its impact on an organization's bottom line.
Sure. Psychological safety is the feeling that you can be your whole self without consequences. It's the feeling that you can push back or challenge the status quo or say what you need to say without negative consequences. And this is super important because we can't be our best if we're afraid of negative repercussions, right? So if I have some really great idea, but I don't feel psychologically safe enough to share it with my manager or my team, then that idea goes unused, and it could be a great idea that could change the organization. So one thing about psychological safety is it's hard to quantify, right? And I see this a lot in the work that I do in organizational culture. It's hard to quantify something like psychological safety or employee engagement, some of these buzzwords we see in HR. But if you really just think logically about it, the example I gave, you can see that it's going to be damaging to an organization's bottom line if people don't feel safe. And I just want to add to that as well. There is a ton of research that the more safe you feel, the more open your brain is sort of to the people around, the more you feel valued, the more your brain can take in. Literally, your brain cannot take in information when we feel unsafe or in a negative place. And so employees can't learn very well about what they should be doing. They can't be innovative. They can't interact with customers in the best way if they don't feel psychologically safe and they don't feel valued. And there's just so much research that supports that. So again, it's hard to quantify for the bottom line on a budget line item, but just if you think logically about it, you can see how it would affect or impact your bottom line.
Absolutely. Sometimes the bottom line can't be quantified like that, and it is something as basic as making sure that your staff feel safe. So, following up on that, what are some uncivil behaviors or actions that employers should be watching out for that might signal an unsafe environment before those incidents happen?
Sure. I think managers especially should be trained and supervisors should be trained to, on this very question that you're asking me, and I think they're often not. But if a manager or supervisor notices that somebody who used to be really involved in the team maybe is a little more quiet, or you can see their body language is, kind of more like this in a meeting versus interacting and looking at the camera. So the answer really is being hyper aware of what's going on in your team and sensing change in how people are functioning. And then you can approach them and say, hey, I notice things seem a little different. Are you okay? And maybe it's a personal problem at home, but maybe it's that something's happening at work. And so it's those subtle interactions among your team that would really demonstrate to you that something's going on.
Absolutely. Have you found that behaviors like harassment, bullying, and incivility have gone up or down during COVID?
I believe they've gone up, and here's why. There are a lot of organizational risk factors that create the opportunity or facilitate the opportunity for bad behavior to occur. So, for example, in an organization that's large and bureaucratic, like a university, for example, it's easy to bully in a scenario like that or to be uncivil in a scenario like that because you can hide behind the bureaucracy and there's so much red tape for anybody who wants to report it, that is a risk factor. All of that bureaucratic mess creates the opportunity for bad behavior to happen. And so some of these other types of risk factors that we see now is high stress. We over time, as we get more and more burnt out, our ability to manage ourselves and how we're reacting to our emotions goes down because we run out of energy for that. So high stress, isolated workplaces. We've got people who may be talking to a manager on Zoom when previously they were talking to them in the hallway where people could hear those interactions, but now it's a little more hidden. Certainly cyberbullying. So I think we are in a perfect storm of risk factors with COVID that actually would be increasing people's use of those behaviors, those uncivil behaviors, and also would be decreasing people's wanting to report it because it can feel a little like it's their word against mine, or I'm not sure if if they're going to lay me off in the next round of layoffs if things are going bad. So I'll just keep quiet so I can keep my job. So I just, like I said, I think we're in a perfect storm that would really be increasing these behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think a lot of people are thinking that those kinds of things don't exist in a remote workplace, and that's not true. Those kinds of things are going to exist in any kind of workplace.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell you, I have a Google alert on the phrase abusive conduct. And pretty regularly, I feel like I get an email from my Google alert saying that the searches on that phrase have gone up 130% from the week prior, or 70% from the week
wow,
prior, 320% it was once. So I don't get
my
those every
goodness.
week, but yeah, I can see it coming through on the alerts. So something's going
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. Do you think that traditional programs like anti-harassment trainings do enough to help employers create a psychologically safe work experience? And I see you shaking your head. If you don't, what else do you think organizations should do?
No, absolutely not. I do not think traditional programs are helpful at all. So, the California compliant harassment prevention training, or any training, even if you're not doing it in California, um, those trainings are designed by lawyers. The learning objectives were designed by lawyers and lawmakers who think that reciting the law or the technical definition of harassment is useful. And while that's nice to know, in the moment, somebody's not thinking, what's that technical definition I learned in the training? They feel it in their bones that they're feeling that it's a hostile work environment, that they feel bullied, or that somebody's being uncivil or using microaggressions. And so I think we've really missed the mark on that harassment prevention training. Our training, when we do that training, we focus quite a bit on interpersonal relationships, and we are compliant because a lot of the technical stuff, the wickets you have to hit, if you will, are in our handout, because we just don't want to have to miss that opportunity. So we need training. Everybody needs training on how to manage our stress. We need training on how to be an ally, how to intervene when we see something negative happening. So if you and I work together and a third person overhears me being rude to you, that third person probably isn't going to do anything about it because they don't know how or what the organization would do. Would the organization support them for stepping in? These are the kinds of things that organizations need to be talking about with their employees, that yes, we would want you to step in because we would like for everyone to take responsibility for a civil work environment where people feel safe. Managers need training on how to coach toxic employees. And my company name is Civility Partners. We always talk about civility and incivility. So when in a topic like harassment prevention, you can see I'm very passionate about this. I'm like, in a topic like harassment prevention, we talk about incivility quite a bit in that training, and that there's this spectrum of behaviors where if managers and supervisors were trained to address a snide, snarky comment that I made to you, or a microaggression, that if we can address that stuff, then that would save us a world of hurt. The rest of the stuff would be less likely. So the research is very clear that people become something like a bully over time, because over time, through the silence that nobody's speaking up against them, they've learned that that behavior is okay. And it becomes more normal for them to engage in that behavior. And eventually it escalates from this low-level behavior into something that's very damaging to the organization, the bottom line, the people, the customers. So no, I don't think training is helpful. In terms of what employers should do, we always say the first step is a survey. So a lot of employers I know are doing something like an employee engagement survey, possibly these days surveys around, well-being and work-life balance and things. The word of caution I have is be careful about your research questions. So if you run a survey, that makes you a social scientist, and that means you have to think about the research question. If your research question is, do people feel engaged, then use an employee engagement survey. If your question is, do people feel psychologically safe, that's a different survey. So don't mistake the good scores on some survey that you're already doing for giving you answers to other topics, So when we work with clients, we use climate assessments where we ask about lots of things. We ask about engagement, trust and leadership, DEI, psychological safety. So that's the place to start. Figure out how your employees are feeling, and then you can develop action items from there.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point, starting it with the employees, because they are the ones who are going to be the most highly affected by any changes that you make with your anti-harassment policies. So I think that's a really great place to start. I have
Yeah.
one more question for you.
Sure.
Are there certain industries that are more prone to lacking psychological safety?
Yes. So if we go back to those risk factors, some of the other risk factors that organizations might have that would essentially facilitate bad behavior, bureaucracy, high competition, an organization that has a lot of employees who have worked there for a long time, and a lot of newer employees. So there's an us versus them mentality when you have an organization that's not very diverse. So if we think about kind of the culmination of all of these different risk factors, and there's many more than the ones I just named. It turns out that healthcare, higher ed, and government agencies are some of the top industries where these behaviors occur because of the things that they have in common. So I'm happy to share, a list of other risk factors with you, and you can maybe post it, or you can Google on the EEOC website, just Google EEOC risk factors, and they've got a long list on their website as well. So I would take a look if anybody's curious. If they're at risk for these types of behaviors, take a look at those risk factors and see if they apply to you. And that's something else, that you should be doing in your trainings or your harassment prevention training, is like, let's look at the risk factors and figure out, can we address the risk factors, thereby minimizing bad behavior and increasing psychological safety.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sitting down and having this chat with me. Once again, Catherine Mattice is going to be joining us at iSight on January 27th, almost forgot the date there, at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to discuss psychological safety in the workplace. Catherine, do you want to say anything about the work that you're putting out right now before we go? Anything you're doing?
I'll just say this. I really believe that it's an employer's responsibility to create an environment where people feel psychologically safe and physically safe. And, what we do for work is a huge part of our self-esteem and self-concept. And if your organization is not allowing people to thrive because of its culture, I think you're doing humanity a disservice. I mean, I'll go so far as to say that. And consider the domino effect. If people feel unhappy at work, they take that home to their families and their friends, and then they take that negativity out to their family and their friends. So versus a positive environment, people come home and they're feeling good. That's going to show up in their relationships, and that's going to flow out into the community. So I hope to see you all there.